Welcome to the Into Novus Knowledge Agronomy Podcast, your go-to resource for agronomic insights, technology solutions, and ongoing education. At Into, we combine agronomic expertise from soil analysis to best practice application methodologies to provide a holistic view for your yield optimization. Our focus is on practical strategies that improve efficiency and drive better results in the field. Join us for interesting discussions, expert advice, and the latest advancements shaping modern agriculture. Whether you're in the field, on the road, or at your facility, we're here to keep you informed and ahead of the curve. All right, thanks everyone for joining us today. Today I'm with Rodney Phelps, counterpart over there in Western Illinois, and then Derek Cottrill, counterpart Northwest Missouri. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, thanks.
Morning, Nick.
Morning, guys. So I thought we'd just start with a little bit update around the geography. There's some variance on how much activities happened in the last 2 weeks. So maybe we'll start with you, Derek, and then work over to Rodney and then back to me.
Sure. Yeah. Well, this week things slowed down quite a bit after the storms. We had some that rolled through a lot of Northwest Missouri on last Thursday night, and then I think almost all my territory got anywhere from an inch and a half to at a little over 3 inches where I'm at across Northwest Missouri on Monday night or Sunday night. So we're wet and we slowed down just a little bit, but last week we were able to get back in and get a lot of field work done. And so planting progress is happening pretty quick, and a lot of herbicide applications going on right now. But things are going good so far. So
Appreciate it, Derek. Rodney, how about you?
Yeah, so we didn't get as much water. We got anywhere from a half inch to 1.2. We did get into the field end of last week and through the weekend. And then we're probably get rolling again today, being Wednesday the 29th. But we're staying exceptionally cool, and we're exceptionally windy. So it's been a challenge. But we did get some crop in the ground, and we were kind of had to sit on the sidelines for a couple 3 days. But we should get back rolling again here very soon.
Appreciate it, Rodney. For me, it's kind of a variance. Last year, the eastern side of my territory was pretty slow to get going and took a while. And this year is kind of a nuance a little bit. The West is generally ahead, better drained soils, but they're actually behind this year. And a lot of variance east to west. I'd say on the east side, I mean, we've got some early birds that are done, but a lot of guys that are in the middle of it. And I'd say that area is probably 50% done, corn and soybeans. You go to the west, they're quite a ways further behind. Some of the guys that got after it early might be about half done, but still there's a long ways to go. And I'd say that side's probably not any more than 25%. So quite a long ways to go for us, especially being spoiled the last 2 years and having a lot done in early April. This year, not the case, especially to the west there. We had some A planted corn to the east last year, but not to the west. So with that said, guys, a lot of variance in terms of planning progress, in terms of where we're at stage wise, in terms of weed control, and just thought that would be a good topic to bring up. Sounds like a concern for all three of us, the weed control piece of it. So thought we might start there with you, Rodney, just kind of going over what are your concerns on weed control, what are your thoughts on that next application, et cetera.
Yeah, so we do have some, not a lot, but some crop in the ground with nothing on it. And so that would be my first call out to make sure when you can get across that to get chemistry on there. The other call out is since we have been cooler, the weeds are older than their size shows. And let me preface that. Weeds, even though we stay cool, they still keep growing. And they are not elongating like a crop would without heat, but they are growing. And so when you look at some of these early germinated weeds, they're older than their size shows. And so we want to make sure that we have a full labeled rates. If we're using Roundup, we probably want to bump that Roundup rate. We want to make sure our adjuvant load is on, make sure the oils are in there. because now, as we flip that calendar here 2 days from now and we start warming up, things are going to advance quickly because of moisture. And so we want to make sure we get chemistry on there to, number one, kill them, and residual to hold that next flush so that we're prepared when we do our post chemistry once that crop's out of the ground. So for me, it's making sure we get chemistry on planted crop without anything over the top of it. And then number two, when we do make our pass, our second pass here, that we've got full rates, all our oils in and loaded for bear.
Appreciate that, Rodney. Derek, what about your way?
Yeah, no, I would double up just on everything Rodney said would probably apply to my area in terms of getting aggressive with your adjuvants and things like that. Yeah, I driving across, I said last Thursday was when that storm came through a lot of my territory, and I saw planters rolling as it was starting to sprinkle and things like that. And so meaning crop was getting put in the ground, and I know some of those fields haven't seen a chemistry yet. And so we're cool this week, but once we warm back up here, extended forecast shows us getting the 80s next week. With all this moisture, things are going to take off. And so, you know, we're still not late by any means. We can still raise a good corn or soybean crop. And so my thing would be whenever it dries out and we can get back to rolling again, what's your priority? Do we need to go burn down weeds? Do we need to be planting, or can we do both? So think about those types of deals, just so we don't get in a situation where we put a lot of crop in the ground, but it hadn't seen a herbicide. So in a few weeks, whenever it's emerged, we're trying to figure out how to get it out, right? So
Yeah, you're exactly right. In my way, I mean, I'd just be reiterating your guys' points, but we're soppy wet right now. 2 to 4 inches that went through there Monday. So I think your point's a good one, Derek, which is we got a little time here for us before we can do anything. We got to prioritize what we need to do next. And yeah, my biggest cause for concern is some of this crop that has been planted, some of it even up. It doesn't have anything down. Saw some carpets of water hemp coming in some of that. Really small right now, easy to control, but can get out of hand pretty darn quick. So that kind of stuff, or stuff that has been planted or maybe not even planted yet, that had a fall app down and nothing's been done since. The water hemp's really coming in those fields as well, or even in places where we had an early spring burn down, like late March, and haven't been back out there since then. So you guys are spot on. I just reiterate, be sure you're using high enough rates um, of your herbicide that's got effective control, especially against water hemp, whether that's meso and corn if it still works for you, or a growth regulator if it doesn't, whether that's Liberty, AMS, and List, or maybe your Extend Flex and beans. But just be sure that you're running a high enough rate to take care of the weed spectrum that you got, especially water hemp. And be sure we're like you said, guys, utilizing enough adjuvant, whether it calls for crop oil or whether AMS, et cetera. Let's just be sure we're using good loads of that. And that's one thing I might mention is, last year we probably were a little more nervous about burning the crop. We were dealing with smaller weeds. We were probably less aggressive with adjuvants, especially with our oils. This year, if we get bigger weeds, we're going to have to be more aggressive and maybe take a little burn on the crop if that's what it comes down to. But definitely, like you guys say, we got to control those weeds and start prioritizing the next pass for sure. All good points, guys. I guess along the topic of being wet, saturated, I think one thing to think about, and Rodney had brought it up earlier, is just nitrogen loss potential. What's that potentially look like for this year? And I think that's a really good call out. I think we've mentioned it before in previous podcasts, but it's been really warm. That March is one of the warmest ones on record for us in central Missouri, and we put on a ton of fall anhydrous this year with the conditions that we've had. We've been warm since. That just means more conversion of that ammonium to nitrate. Nitrate's a losable form. Obviously, the more water we have, the more we're either going to leach that out or denitrify that. And so heavy rains can increase that when it comes to leaching and denitrification. At least in central Missouri, we've had that the last few days for sure. Not crying wolf yet, but just making the point that especially if we have some heavy rain in May, June, July. That's going to determine a lot of potential loss. The wetter we are, the more we're going to lose. And just, yeah, to Rodney's point, just be sure you have a backup plan in place. If you're not planning on top dressing your corn, at least kind of have a backup plan there just in case we get into one of those really wet stretches with really warm temperatures. If things are ideal from here on out, it may not be that big of a deal. But if we get really wet in May or June or even early July, it could be a major deal. But I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that.
Yeah, in my area, we had some 85 and 90-degree days about 3 weeks ago. And so, this nitrogen, in the nitrate form is probably when we got that warm, it moved deeper. And then if we have some ponding water areas, and then we warm back up, that nitrogen we're gonna lose some of it, but we're gonna have it deep. And so we're probably going to be chasing it most of the cropping season. So we need to make sure to Nick's point, spot on, have a backup plan. We're not crying wolf yet, but I think we all witnessed last year that we had the oh boy, I should have fed it a little more, and we're probably running right into that same scenario here in the 26 crop. So have a backup plan. We're not saying you need to put hundreds of pounds, but we're saying 40, 50 units at the right time could be a big difference this fall.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add there, I mean, you guys are spot on. The only thing I'd add there is something I said, I think, on one of the last couple podcasts is remember we had plenty of crop that was getting put in early. And with these rainfall events and crop emerging, that's going to shift up our top dress timing too. Now the corn's not demanding a whole lot of nitrogen right now by any means, but just be aware that I know it seems early, but with the crop emerging, we got to, just like with weeds, we got to be timely with our nitrogen application. So if you are going to top dress, which majority of people are in my territory now, that's going to shift up as well, and we got to be timely on that.
Those are good points, guys. And Derek, I guess you bring up a good point and just talking about the opposite effect of that. So I've seen this in previous years, and we couldn't, I hope not, but could get in a situation this year too, is we put on a fall application of anhydrous, and we expected to plant our corn April 15th, April 20th, and all of a sudden it's May 15th when we get our corn planted, or May 20th, and all of a sudden we've shifted the uptake of that corn, that peak uptake, further back into the season, which just
Yep.
allows a wider window for nitrogen loss on that fall anhydrous. So yeah, to that point, that's just something else to be mindful of. If we plant later, the uptake happens later, and if you put on a fall app, I mean, there's more potential for loss because we just give it more time to go away before the crop soaks it up.
Yep. Yep.
Good points, guys. We kind of got a potpourri here of topics, so I'm going to keep it moving. But Rodney had brought something up before the call, just talking a little bit about cold germs and emergence, various hybrids varieties. So I might just kick it over to you, Rodney, to go ahead and finish that topic.
Yeah, so my thought process is any crop that's left to be planted, and there's plenty of it, and we're potentially going to go into wetter soils, probably cooler temps. So make sure on this last part of your planting or first part, whatever it is, that you know your cold germ on your corn and your beans, and your seed supplier can get that and should supply that to you. And where I'm going with that, make sure if you're going to get right back after this weather event, you plant the better cold germ stuff first, and then as your cold germs decrease, keep that to the latter part of your planting window when things should be warmer. The reason I say that is cold germ relates to vigor in the seed, and vigor is how much push that crop has to get to germinate and get itself out of the ground. And if we don't have good cold germ and that stuff lays there and soaks up cool water, it soaks up disease, it soaks up chemistry, it just soaks up a lot of stuff. We may, if it doesn't have a good cold germ and a good vigor, it could just run out of carbohydrates and sugars and just basically rot there in the row. So we just want to make sure that we know our germinations, especially cold, of what we're planting moving forward, so that we have the best chance to get the crop out of the ground. Because now the replant scenario, it's probably not, we can hit on that at another time, but then those replant decisions become harder.
Points, Rodney. Derek, you'd mentioned just about reiterating not late yet. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as we're certainly not with beans yet, I know over the last several years, we've been talking early planting dates and things like that. And so there tends to be a big rush in April to get stuff in. But, I think the date is right around May 10th or so is when corn yield might start to drop off a little bit. And as we get into May, that mid-May timeframe, we might start adjusting even bean populations and things like that. But we're certainly not late yet. And so since a lot of my area is wet, I just remind guys to don't rush back in whenever we do dry out type deal. Because yeah, we're not even quite to May 1st yet, and we still got plenty of time. And the other thing is too, we've been going so hard, and a lot of crops already been put in the ground. Take advantage of these wetter days. Check out your planters, recalibrate them, make sure they're at the right setting. Rodney was talking about it being cool, which it is in our territory right now too. Depth is going to be important. All that stuff's still important, and so utilize this time to re-go through the planner and make sure everything's set where it needs to be.
Yeah, those are good points. I think, yeah, reiterating the fact that we're not late yet, especially not in a normal year, but some folks have been spoiled the past few years and been able to get planted in early April and get done by mid-April or even the 20th or so. And this is not one of those years, but like you said, we have plenty of time, and for sure don't want to create any sins here at planting time that you're going to regret all year. So definitely don't want to rush back out there. The the topic, Rodney kind of alluded to it, but the replant topic, I guess that's something at least me, I wanted to bring up. Just we've had a pretty heavy rain event and we had some crop planted right in front of it. So getting a few questions in terms of replant, just what are we looking for? What are we going to do? Definitely not crying wolf. It's way too early to know on that stuff just yet, but just to give folks some idea what you're looking for when it does start coming up and how we assess that. And you guys jump in wherever. I'll just give my 2 cents. I mean, if we're looking at a soybean stand, we're looking at those. If you have a stand of 100,000, to me, I mean, that's an extremely conservative number. You're good. A lot of times you'll count beans and beans look really good, and you get out there and start counting. You're like, oh, that's 100,000. And people are like, well, I planted 140 or I planted 150. It's like, well, it doesn't, you're at 100% of yield with 100,000. So it doesn't matter. I'll easily go down to 80. I mean, I've taken them in the 70s, if it's an even stand. There's some data from Purdue that says if you have 66,000 or greater, you shouldn't do anything. Some data from Wisconsin that says if you're 50,000 or greater, you shouldn't do anything. I get pretty nervous at those lower levels. For me, start thinking about weed control, that kind of stuff. I usually like to fill in when I get that low, but that's everybody's preference, just giving you the data of what they've talked about. And then obviously, I think most of us know this. When it comes to a soybean stand, it's all about light capture as fast as we can get it so we don't ever tear it up. We just plant into it. And generally, what works pretty well if we're going back into 15s or 7.5s is you have the ability just to angle 30-inch rows across there to fill it back in. A lot of people ask, well, how many do I put back in? And man, it varies a lot, but to me, usually trying to gauge on getting a final stand of around 140. So if I've got let's say 60 out there, and I think I need to add 80 to get to 140. You got to factor in a little bit of tear out as you go across there. So, and what are conditions going to be like? But usually that's what you're shooting for is to try to get somewhere around that final stand of 140. Um, the other piece of it, I guess I would skip over to corn. And corn, obviously, I don't know about you guys, but the bar is set a lot higher in terms of stand and a lot quicker to pull the trigger on redoing something if it doesn't look right or it looks off. And if you got a stand that has big holes and problems in it, probably best to tear it out, start all over. With corn, generally, if I can get a relatively even stand of 20 or above, I'm usually going to keep it unless I'm in really high yield potential type field, and I feel like 20 isn't going to give me enough. But on upland, just I'd say average ground, if I can get 20 or above, I'm usually going to keep it, unless we come back pretty quick with the replant. But obviously, days depend on how many days out we get, where our threshold becomes. If we planted this crop on April 15th and we can't get back in there until June 1st, then obviously the tolerance gets a little wider per se. But yeah, I'll let you guys. I think one of you wanted to jump in there. You guys jump right in there.
I don't have a lot to add, so I'll jump in before Rodney because I think, everything that you just said would apply. But I think you mentioned it, yield potential, especially when it comes to beans and stuff. I think a lot of us get too wrapped up into this exact population versus what is our yield potential there. What have we already invested in the crop? Whether that be what fertilizer have we put down, what other management programs have we put down? Like you said, Nick, there's some research out there that shows 50 to 60,000 plants, where you have to be before you do anything. Now, that's never our goal to get that low, but whether you're at 100,000 or 140,000, whatever it may be, I think it's a field by field scenario. And what are we dealing with? What do weeds look like? And what's the risk versus reward of going back in there? So consider the field itself, and the yield potential is going to vary that. Don't just focus on, well, I got this many plants, and so I'm going to lose yield. Well, what else is going on in the field to justify us going back in there? But that's all I had to add, and I'll let Rodney add on to that.
Yeah, you guys have hit the bean spot on. Corn, one call out I'll make is know your hybrid, because some of those hybrids, if they're a determinate ear, you're going to have the population. But if they're a flex, more of a semi or a flex ear, you can give up some population and still do okay. The biggest thing on corn is uniformity in that stand. And if there's stretches in a row where there's no plants, that's a bad day because of weed control and others. So corn is it's more of an exact science than beans because you know what you see and what you can do. The thing we got to remember on corn is we just can't go plant back in. You got to tear that initial stand up, and then what are you going back with and all those things. So I hate replant scenarios in corn because there's a lot of variables there that we've got to assess before we tear up a stand of corn and go back in and plant again. So everything you guys are all spot on beans and corn. It is a head scratcher sometimes on do or don't I, but your hybrid. Make sure you get your seed supplier involved and before you make some rash decisions on replant corn.
Yeah, I'm glad you added that. Those are good points, right? I'm glad you added that piece too on uniformity. Is that, yeah, you're spot on. I didn't mention that. I probably generalized a little bit too much, but uniformity becomes critical. And if you have plants that are V2, V3, and then you got stuff that's just spiked out of the ground, I mean, obviously that one has almost become a weed at that point. And so you do have to factor that in there. Yeah, and you're right. The tolerance for a crappy stand of corn is pretty low or pretty thin in my book. I'm gonna get rid of it quicker. And you're right. Just you tear it all out and you start all over. It's the best thing you can do. I think on the corn piece of it too, we could get into a whole conversation of killing failed corn stands. So if you weren't taking it out with iron, which you have to rip it all the way out. Be sure whatever tool you're using, it takes it all the way out. It doesn't just work it up lightly. But with herbicide, yeah, that could be a whole topic in itself of how to handle that, how to go about it. If you're wanting to plant and kill it or kill it right before you plant, I mean, there's not a whole lot of options except for that kind of that gramoxone metribuzin, I guess is what I usually go to. You got to have the metribuzin with it to make it work. Um, but yeah, if you go that select route or that clethodim route, then there is a wait time there. But that could be a whole, we could discuss a whole podcast on killing failed corn stands. So I won't belabor that topic too much. The last thing I did want to mention though on soybeans, you guys made me think of this while we were talking. On a soybean stand, if we're going to go in and replant, a lot of times people ask, well, what maturity do I go back in if I'm just filling in a stand? Let's say I've got a 4.6 there, and then do I go back with a 4.6 or do I go earlier? What do I do? And most of the time, most people's thought is, well, we need to go earlier. If you look at a lot of the data out there, you look at a lot of this university data, they'll tell you to go back in with a similar maturity. And I think that is, from an agronomic standpoint, I think that is the right idea or the right thought process. The only thing I've noticed over my career is that there are quite a few guys that you have to take your personality as a grower into it. And some guys will absolutely wait until the entire field is brown and mature and ready before they'll go combine it and don't want to see any green out there or any green spots. And so my thing is, if that's your personality, then you probably are best off to go in with an earlier maturity at that point. Then, if you're going to sit around and wait for these holes to all turn brown, because I just feel like you're going to lose so much yield by letting the rest of the field get to 9% while you're waiting on those spots to get down to 13. It'd been better just to plant, a late group 3 and an early 4 into a field of 4.6. Otherwise, if you're willing to go after and maybe take some spots, a few chunks that are a little bit wet, then yeah, you go back in with a similar maturity. But yeah, sorry to belabor that. I just happened to have that thought while we were talking. Guys, anything else, last minute topics you guys wanted to mention?
Now, the only comment I'll make is don't, we're not late yet. And we don't, it's these kind of scenarios that some wrong decision. I don't want to call them bad because everybody has a reason for what they do, but make sure they're calculated moves now because we're not late yet. But when we look at the calendar, the chances of doing things twice or fixing, we every day we get further into the year, or the day we can't fix it. So make sure that what the moves you're making moving forward are calculated and why you're doing them and do them correctly so that you don't have to live with the mistake all year.
Yeah, I'll
Well,
just piggyback on that. Like I said a minute ago, if you are in an area where you're wet, and instead of being bummed out about not getting crop in right now, take advantage of this time to go through your planter again. And if you're a private applicator, go through your sprayer, check your nozzles, your strainers, your screens, and get everything cleaned up and calibrated and ready to go whenever we do warm back up. But we can take advantage of this time to do some things that we probably should be doing when it's dry, but we just don't because we're moving so quick.
that's great advice, guys. And yeah, I would reiterate that. I mean, we've raised some really good corn. Even the eastern side of my geography that was later last year raised some great corn, middle of May, planted mid-May, planted late May. We've had years where we've had great corn planted in June. So to your point, just be patient. Rodney says calculated. I think that's a great point. When it's ready, yeah, we need to be ready to roll and get as much done as we possibly can. But let's make sure things are right before we get rolling. With that, guys, appreciate your guys' comments, suggestions on this one. Appreciate everyone for listening. We definitely look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Into Novus Knowledge. Please reach out to your Into agronomist if we can help in any way. Join us next time for more in-depth agronomic advice.